Hello everyone, DarkOfAllTrades here. In an attempt to make videos just a bit shorter, something I've been trying to do every video and somehow keep failing at doing, today I'm going to respond to a single short and see how it goes. As of writing this script, and then as of recording as well, I have no idea how long my part will be. So here it goes. Today's short video is from a well-known but definitely not well-liked, at least in the atheist community, channel Answers in Genesis Canadialand. For those of you who may not know, Answers in Genesis is the organization run by one of the worst exports from Australia, the infamous Ken Ham, best known for having a book. While I have poked a bit of fun at Ken Ham, it seems he isn't particularly well liked in the religious community either. In fact, in all of the videos to which I have responded, whenever Ken Ham is mentioned in the original video, it is never something positive. But that isn't terribly surprising, as he is a young earth creationist and a biblical literalist. Not to mention his park and the shenaniganery he tried to pull with his taxes. Ken Ham, revered ruler of dinosaur rodeos and brainchild behind the curious construction resembling a vessel known as the Ark Encounter. With a beard that could rival a fraternity of wet squirrels in terms of both size and splendor, he boldly upholds the notion that T-Rexes were nothing more than giant fans of leafy greens aboard Noah's floating buffet. In between pondering whether or not penguins had floaties on deck, or if ostriches did the moonwalk to hitch a ride, you can often hear him fervently defending the value of water slides inspired by the swift and fearsome velociraptor. Undoubtedly, Ken Ham has made a name for himself by transforming the concept of ancient history into a completely confounding contradiction. But that's enough about him. Making fun of the guy is too easy. I don't normally like to say unkind things, but very few people actually deserve the ridicule. Besides, he doesn't care what I have to say. Leave your thoughts on Ken Ham in the comments. I'm interested in what the audience thinks. Anyway, where was I? Kinda lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, Answers in Genesis Canadialand. This short is titled, An Easy Way to Challenge an Atheist. Note, I didn't intentionally pick this still. This is what the YouTubes gave me. So where do you think this is going? Maybe some form of the cosmological argument? Maybe the teleological argument? Maybe talking about the anthropic principle? Who knows? There are plenty of ways to challenge an atheist. Some atheists enjoy a game of chess, while others like a cooking challenge. It all depends on the person. But I am beginning to ramble again, so let's just jump into this short and see what... who is this person? I'm not super familiar with foreign channels. I'm actually going to have to look this guy up, as I've seen him on other channels. Calvin Smith, that's his name. Do you think he's a Calvinist? Jokes aside, let's see what Calvin Smith thinks is an easy way to challenge an atheist.
This is the question to ask the atheist that says this.
So it looks like we're talking about the soft, weak, agnostic atheist position. This will be just for those who lack belief or are not convinced, but are also not convinced that a God does not exist. I don't really like the idea of lack when talking about beliefs. I talk about it a bit more in my video response to conscious philosophy. I'll leave a link in the description for those who are interested. Okay, I'll take on that role for this and see if I can help others who may struggle with tough questions from their religious interlocutors. Bring on the question.
What is it that you lack belief in?
I would say I lack a belief in God. Any God. Probably for the same or similar reasons why you lack a belief in any other God beside the one that you believe in. Relying on scientific explanations and critical thinking, I approach the world through a naturalistic perspective, devoid of any belief in the existence of any supernatural beings. I reject the idea that the universe was created or governed by any gods or deities, and instead seek evidence-based answers to understanding the phenomena around us. My lack of belief doesn't stem from absolute certainty, but it's based on a lack of persuasive evidence or arguments. A switch in my position is possible with solid proof, but currently, I embrace a secular worldview and rational decision-making.
Make them explain it. Do you lack a belief in Allah, the Gitchi Manitou, the one true God of the Bible?
Allah and the God of the Bible are the same being, but I don't believe any God exists, including the Great Spirit, as well as every other deity you could list here. All of them for the same reason. I keep my beliefs consistent. I reject your God for the same reason I reject the great serpent Quetzalcoatl. I've been waiting for a reason to say that name, and I finally get to do it here. Pick a God, any God, and I don't believe in it.
What is God that you lack belief in like?
We don't really have enough time for me to go over the qualities of each God individually. This is a very short-sighted question from a very biased standpoint. I also don't believe in the Egyptian pantheon of gods. But let me take this a bit more seriously. Very broadly, and likely most relevantly, the concept of God that I lack belief in typically involves a supernatural, all-powerful being believed to have created and oversees the universe. This deity is often described as having specific attributes like omniscience, omnipotence, and omnibenevolence. Believers often consider God to be a source of moral guidance, purpose, and ultimate justice. However, I don't find the evidence or arguments presented for the existence of such a deity convincing. I base my worldview on naturalistic explanations and a lack of empirical support for the existence of a divine being.
Prompt them. Is it the God you believe in supposed to have the power to create the universe? Yes or no?
I think Calvin misspoke here. Let me fix that. I believe I answered this in my last segment. Though, to be clear, I don't believe any deity or being that has ever been purported to have created the universe, or even one that may have the power to do so. I also don't believe in a God that doesn't have the power to do so either. It sounds like Calvin is trying to narrow the focus to a specific kind of God that is trying to force the atheist to define a God so he can say something like, I don't believe in that God either. This is coming off like a word game to waste time so he doesn't have to defend his belief against the God he believes in. I'll tell you what I tell everyone who asks me to disprove the existence of God. You tell me what properties your God has, and I'll tell you why I don't believe it exists. Other than that, again, I'm not going to spend time disproving a God you don't believe in to you. It doesn't move the conversation anywhere.
Does the God you lack belief in supposedly set the moral absolutes? Yes or no?
I reject the idea that there are moral absolutes. The absence of consistent moral values across cultures and history undermines the idea of moral absolutes, indicating that ethics are shaped by societal norms and human experiences. Variations in moral beliefs and conflicting ethical standards among societies highlight the lack of universally applicable framework. The biological and social origins of morality, according to cognitive science, contribute to diverse ethical viewpoints influenced by individual and group differences. Historical changes in societal attitudes towards issues like human rights and gender equality demonstrate the fluidity of moral principles over time. The presence of moral dilemmas and ethical disagreements both within and between cultures suggests that moral decision-making is complex and subjective. Without empirical evidence or a universally accepted moral authority, the concept of moral absolutes appears more as a philosophical construct than an inherent truth. So just like with every question so far, you can take your pick. I don't believe in a God that supposedly set the moral absolutes if they existed, and I don't believe in a God that supposedly did not set the moral absolutes if they existed.
You see, saying you have a lack of belief may sound like it makes sense to someone until you realize that once you're introduced to an idea, you can't be neutral towards it.
Lacking a belief in an idea or concept isn't necessarily neutral to the idea or concept. People can react to new ideas in different ways, and neutrality is one possible response. Upon introduction to an idea, individuals can have varying reactions. They might be intrigued, curious, indifferent, skeptical, accepting, or even resistant. Neutrality is one of those potential reactions. It is entirely possible for someone to acknowledge an idea without forming a strong opinion for or against it. Take something arbitrary that one could believe in but we don't know. The popular one I've seen is the existence of a large diamond below the surface of one of the moons of Jupiter. It is a diamond, just like we would find in the ground here on Earth, so we know diamonds exist. So now you've been introduced to the concept. So by your logic, you can't be neutral toward it. Or do you hold a rational position and just lack a belief in the existence of that very large diamond?
You begin making judgments about the concepts that you're being exposed to. You can consider it's plausible, accepted, think it's nuts, crazy, rejected, or whatever. Maybe you need more information to come to a definite conclusion. But you can't just say any longer that you lack a belief in it.
What do you think the phrase that you just said, "You may need more information to come to a definite conclusion," means? It means you may still lack a belief until more evidence is presented, one way or the other. The exact opposite of what you just said.
Because it isn't it.
This violates the law of identity. You cannot say that something is not itself.
It's defined to some extent a concept.
Defining something doesn't change anything about the thing you're defining. This gets really close to the realicorn. A realicorn is a unicorn that is real because we call it a realicorn. Simply because we define it as something that exists, does that mean it actually exists? No. We don't get to define things into existence, and defining something doesn't change the thing's properties. When you define something, you're essentially providing a conceptual framework or a set of criteria that help others, or yourself, recognize and differentiate that thing from other things. The act of defining helps create a shared understanding and common language for discussing and referring to that particular concept.
So you can't lack a belief in it anymore, the way you're trying to frame it.
Why not? I can get really specific about the diamond I brought up earlier. I can make very specific claims about its size, weight, how shiny it would be in the sunlight, how much it would be worth here on Earth, exactly where it is, any number of things. But defining it doesn't change whether you lack a belief in its existence or not. Of course, I could make radical claims that contradict other claims about its properties, in which case, that could change your belief, much like when, not if, the properties associated with your God become contradictory. Lack of belief can change to rejection of the claim to the point of acceptance of the counterclaim. For example, not saying this is the only reason, but I would be willing to bet that you, Calvin, don't believe that Quetzalcoatl exists because your book says something like there are no other gods, right? If Quetzalcoatl existed, then that would contradict your book, so you cannot believe that God exists, right? Same concept. The God of the Bible runs counter to what we know about most sciences and even runs counter to the God of the Bible. If that God existed, it would contradict itself, so paradoxically, it could not exist. And that's the end of the video. Super short. So let me summarize the actual question asked here, and you can give me your answers in the comments. Presuming there is only one God, what are the properties of the God you lack a belief in? To me, this sounds like a great big shifting of the burden of proof fallacy. As I've stated before, it sounds like Calvin is trying to get the atheist to provide the definition of God so he can keep his belief when it doesn't match perfectly with the God he believes in. It is a blatantly dishonest tactic. That's it for this one. What did you think? Do you think this is a good question for religious people to ask their atheist friends? Or do you think, like me, that this strategy is a tremendous waste of time? I suppose in all of this, I can look back at the title and see how apt it is for this video. Calvin said this was an easy way to challenge an atheist. He didn't say anything about it being a good way to challenge an atheist. So technically, yes, Calvin is correct. This was an easy way, but I'm not sure what the goal of asking the question is. Put on your Jesus hat. What do you think the goal of asking the question would be? If you found my dissection as entertaining as Ken Ham's beard rivalry with a fraternity of squirrels, give that like button a scientific high five. And if you're excited as I was to drop the name Quetzalcoatl without tripping over it, then subscribe if you haven't already for more brain-bending conversations that make even Calvin Smith question his Calvinism. Massive gratitude to my patrons, Long-Haired Lefty, Musical Ocelot, and Jammin' Bomb. You are the real acorns in this cosmic carnival. If you want to join them for as low as $1 a month, you too can be a potential description of a supernatural being that actually exists for real if you head over to patreon.com/DarkOfAllTrades. And as always, keep learning.